My name is Emily Parker, and I am 28 years old, the black sheep of my wealthy Boston family. While my siblings collected Ivy League degrees and parental praise, I secretly built a healthcare tech company from nothing. Tonight was supposed to be just like every other family gathering. The same polite smiles masking quiet judgment. The same rehearsed conversations where my name was barely mentioned. I expected nothing more than the usual dismissive nods and backhanded comments. But I never imagined that while they were in the middle of cutting me off completely, my phone would ring. And with one single call, the years they spent minimizing me would collapse into stunned silence. Sometimes, the most satisfying victories are the ones you never have to defend. They speak for themselves. Before I tell you how my family tried to erase me right before discovering I was worth millions, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, surrounded by everything that screamed success. The grand colonial house with its pristine white columns, the meticulously trimmed hedges, the luxury cars parked in the circular driveway. It was all part of the Dawson family image. To the outside world, we were perfect. To my parents, appearances were everything. My father, Robert Dawson, built his empire on Wall Street. After decades at Goldman Sachs, his name carried weight in every financial circle that mattered. He valued two things above all else: power and reputation. My mother, Vivian, was his flawless counterpart. A Wellesley graduate who traded a promising career for charity galas and private club memberships, she knew how to maintain the perfect image of a polished, respectable family. My siblings fit into that world perfectly. My older brother, Nicholas, was my father's pride. At 30, he was already a vice president at my father's firm. His Harvard MBA wasn't even hanging in his own office, but in my father's study, like a trophy that belonged to the family name. My younger sister, Charlotte, was the princess of the family. With her picture-perfect smile, her law degree from Harvard, and her engagement to a rising political star, she was being groomed for the kind of high society life my mother always dreamed of for her daughters. Then there was me, the middle child, the one who never quite fit into the carefully scripted family narrative. While Charlotte was practicing debate speeches and Nicholas was perfecting golf swings at the country club, I was dismantling computers on the floor of my bedroom. I wasn't interested in charity luncheons or designer gowns. I was captivated by codes, algorithms, and the quiet logic of machines. By the time I was 12, I had already taught myself basic programming from online tutorials. While my parents worried about how my obsession would affect my social life, I was building simple software in my room late into the night. My father once found me coding at 2 a.m. and shook his head. "Computers are for boys who can't make it in business, Emily, and certainly not for a Dawson daughter," he said with his usual blend of disappointment wrapped in forced humor. My mother wasn't much better. She was far more concerned about how I looked while sitting in front of those screens. "Darling, you'll ruin your posture and strain your eyes. No respectable man wants to marry a woman who spends all night staring at a computer." High school was no different. I attended Phillips Academy, where I excelled in math and science. I won national robotics competitions and placed top scores in computer science, but my victories were met with indifference. My parents showed up to exactly one science fair, and only because Nicholas had a golf tournament nearby. When I scored a perfect SAT math score, my mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, dear." They already had my path mapped out. Wharton for undergrad, Harvard Business School after that, and then a well-connected consulting firm before settling down with an appropriate husband from a proper family. But I had different plans. I applied to MIT. When I told them, my father chuckled. "Engineering? That's for people who build things for our companies, not for people who run them." My mother looked horrified. "But all your friends are going to Yale or Princeton. How will you meet anyone at MIT?" Despite their protests, I went to MIT on a partial scholarship. They could have easily paid the full tuition, but my father called it a lesson in financial responsibility. I worked part-time throughout college, juggling multiple jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. On graduation day, while my classmates were surrounded by proud parents and siblings, I stood alone except for one person. My Aunt Margaret, my father's younger sister, was the only family member who truly saw me. She was a literature professor who never quite fit the Dawson mold herself. Twice divorced, colorful scarves, fiercely independent. She always told me, "You don't have to follow their path to succeed, Emily." My parents and siblings, on the other hand, were in Martha's Vineyard celebrating Charlotte's engagement that same weekend. After graduation, I landed my first job at a small healthcare startup in Cambridge. My starting salary was $65,000, which in my parents' eyes might as well have been minimum wage. Compared to Nicholas's six-figure income fresh out of Harvard, I was barely making pocket change. Every family gathering became another opportunity for subtle humiliation. My mother would explain my situation to her friends as if I were on some kind of soul-searching sabbatical. Emily is still figuring out what she wants to do. She's very free-spirited, you know. As if I was backpacking across Europe instead of working 60-hour weeks at a startup, learning how the healthcare industry really worked. My father, never missing a chance to take a jab, loved making the same joke at Thanksgiving every year. All that education for a secretary's salary. Charlotte was even more refined with her backhanded compliments. She would flash her practice smile and say, "It's so inspiring how you don't care about money or status, Emily. I don't think I could ever be that carefree." They saw my work as a temporary phase, a hobby that would eventually fade when I came to my senses and followed the Dawson family blueprint. But what they didn't understand was that while they were busy measuring success by promotions and property investments, I was quietly observing something far more valuable. I saw the cracks inside the healthcare system they never thought to look at. The inefficiencies, the suffering, the endless waiting lists for specialist care, the bureaucracy that left patients waiting for months while their conditions worsened. I started to realize that these problems weren't impossible to solve. They were outdated systems waiting for the right technology. While my parents saw me as some aimless tech girl, I was learning exactly where to strike. 2 years into my job, the idea that would change everything hit me during one of my many late-night coding sessions in my tiny Somerville apartment. A fully integrated, HIPAA-compliant telehealth platform that could securely match patients with specialists using AI. It would optimize schedules, reduce wait times, and allow remote consultations with seamless medical record sharing and prescription management. Everything the healthcare system was failing to do. I called it Vital Link. I pulled together every dollar I had managed to save, $50,000, and poured it into building the prototype. Every cent went into development, server costs, and basic marketing. By day, I kept my full-time job. By night, I coded, researched, and refined the business plan. My social life disappeared. My apartment floor was littered with takeout containers and notebooks full of diagrams. Finding investors was the next battle. Over and over again, I pitched to rooms full of middle-aged men who smiled politely but dismissed me the moment I finished speaking. "Healthcare is complicated," one of them said, as if I hadn't spent years immersed in it. Another one offered, "You seem bright, but you should find a male technical co-founder. Investors need someone more experienced." A few even suggested that I hand over the CEO title and take a CTO role instead, letting someone more seasoned lead the business side. In total, I pitched 37 investors before someone finally saw the vision. Rebecca Sinclair, a former healthcare executive turned angel investor, was the first to believe in me. She invested $200,000, enough to quit my job and start hiring my first team. I brought on a back-end developer, a UI/UX designer, and hired Olivia Daniels as my assistant. From day one, Olivia proved she was far more than just an assistant. With her background in healthcare administration and work ethic that matched my own, she understood exactly what we were building. Within months, she was functioning as my de facto COO, though we didn't have the luxury of fancy titles back then. Our first office was a converted storage room inside a co-working space in Kendall Square. We worked 7 days a week, sometimes past midnight. During a brutal July heatwave when the air conditioning broke, we sat coding in our t-shirts with bags of frozen peas on our necks. We couldn't afford real desks, so we worked off cardboard boxes and sat on floor cushions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. The breakthrough came 9 months later, when Massachusetts General Hospital agreed to pilot VitalLink in their neurology department. The results were better than even I had dared to hope. Patient satisfaction increased by 42%, wait times dropped by 68%, and specialist utilization improved by a third. Now we had numbers, real data that spoke louder than any pitch ever could. More hospitals signed on. Revenues grew. We moved into a real office space. Series A funding brought in $4.5 million. Series B brought $28 million at a $65 million valuation. And still, through all of it, I said nothing to my family. They thought I was still working for that small startup in Cambridge, maybe with a slight promotion. I let them believe I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment when I had, in fact, purchased a beautiful loft in South Boston. I still drove my old Honda Civic to family dinners, leaving my new Tesla hidden in the garage. The secrecy wasn't just for some grand surprise, it was protection. I couldn't stomach seeing them dismiss the thing I was pouring my entire soul into. And as VitalLink grew, so did a quiet part of me that wanted to prove I didn't need their approval, their money, or their connections to build something real. In the weeks leading up to that dinner, VitalLink was preparing for its biggest leap yet. The IPO was in motion. Ironically, Goldman Sachs, my father's own firm, was leading the underwriting. The early valuation talks hovered around $100 million. We had expanded to over 100 employees, secured contracts with dozens of hospitals nationwide, and our growth was drawing the attention of major international investors. The night before the dinner, Olivia and I were still on back-to-back calls with potential investors from Europe and Asia. One of them was SoftBank, who was seriously considering taking a major pre-IPO position that could push our valuation even higher. As I picked out my outfit for the family dinner, I deliberately chose something simple. A plain black dress from a department store, even though I could easily afford high-end designer labels now. Tonight wasn't about showing off. It was about protecting myself one last time. I arrived at my parents' estate exactly on time. The house looked exactly as it always had, frozen in perfection. The grand colonial facade, the carefully manicured gardens, the driveway lined with luxury cars. Nicholas's Porsche and Charlotte's Range Rover gleamed under the porch lights. My old Honda Civic, parked behind them, looked almost ridiculous by comparison, and I intended it that way. Before I could even knock, the front door opened. Mrs. Green, the housekeeper who had worked for our family for over 20 years, greeted me with her usual warm smile. "Miss Emily, it's good to see you." "You too, Mrs. Green," I smiled, handing her the modest bottle of wine I had brought. "Is everyone already here?" "They're in the solarium. Your brother's sharing some news about his latest promotion." Of course he was. I smoothed my dress, took a breath, and walked toward the familiar sound of laughter and clinking glasses. The solarium was my mother's pride. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the back gardens, every detail carefully staged like a spread from a design magazine. The whole scene was painfully familiar. My father stood near the fireplace, holding court as always, a glass of scotch in hand. My mother was arranging hors d'oeuvres with surgical precision, ensuring everything looked effortless. Nicholas was boasting animatedly about his new role, and Charlotte nodded along, perfectly polished in her pale pink sheath dress. The one unexpected face in the room was my Aunt Margaret. She rarely attended these gatherings, but tonight she was here, standing out in her colorful scarf and warm smile. She had always been the only person in the family who didn't expect me to apologize for who I was. "Emily, you finally made it," my mother called out as if I was late, even though I was exactly on time. "Hello, Mother," I said, accepting her air kiss. Traffic was heavy from Cambridge. "You really should consider moving closer to the family," she replied, using the same line she had recycled for years. "There are some lovely places in Back Bay. It would make things so much more convenient." Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed across the room. "There she is, the computer genius," he said with a wide grin that never reached his eyes. He raised his glass but made no effort to approach me. "Hi, Dad." "Still at that little startup?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension, pretending to forget the company's name for the 100th time. "Something like that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Nicholas approached next, reeking of expensive cologne and corporate arrogance. "Baby sister," he smirked. just telling everyone about my new promotion. 14 people reporting to me now, and a corner office with a view of the harbor. He took a long, deliberate sip of his martini. But hey, I'm sure whatever you do with your computers is rewarding too. Charlotte followed with her signature backhanded compliment. You look comfortable, Emily. Very appropriate for your position. The only genuine greeting came from Aunt Margaret, who crossed the room to pull me into a warm hug. How are you really? She whispered. Surviving, I whispered back, grateful for her presence. The rest of the evening unfolded like every other. My father dissected stock market forecasts with Nicholas. My mother went on about wedding preparations with Charlotte, who complained about the difficulty of keeping the guest list under 300 people. I sat quietly, sipping my wine, nodding when appropriate, wondering how they would react if they knew that only last week I had been in closed-door meetings with senators discussing healthcare policy reform. While they mocked my computer hobby, my platform was already improving hospital systems across the country. Finally, Mrs. Green appeared to announce that dinner was served, mercifully breaking up the small talk. The dining room was designed to intimidate. A long mahogany table under a crystal chandelier, oil paintings of long dead ancestors lining the walls, all carefully curated to project legacy and power. We took our assigned seats. My parents sat at opposite ends of the table. Nicholas and Charlotte to one side, Aunt Margaret and I on the other. The empty chair beside me was once my grandfather's. He had been the only other person besides Margaret who ever really encouraged my curiosity. As the first course arrived, my mother raised her glass. To so many wonderful things happening in the family, she said. To Nicholas's promotion, to Charlotte's upcoming wedding, and to family togetherness. The pause before she reached for something to say about me was painfully obvious. The meal progressed into what had become a yearly ritual. Updates from each family member, a carefully staged performance where my parents silently scored each child's achievements. Nicholas led, detailing his promotion, his team's expansion, his bonus structure, and the complicated mergers he had overseen. My mother asked pointed follow-up questions to highlight just how impressive it all was. Charlotte followed, blending wedding updates with casual mentions of her law school accomplishments and her fiancé's rising political connections. Finally, all eyes turned to me. And you, Emily? My father asked. Anything new with your computer job? The familiar tightness formed in my chest. After all these years, they still saw me as the aimless daughter tinkering with technology they didn't understand. I took a steady breath. The healthcare platform I've been working on is doing quite well, I said carefully. We've expanded to several hospitals. That's nice, dear. My mother interrupted dismissively before I could say more. She turned instantly back to Nicholas. Nicholas, didn't you mention you're looking at a summer house on Nantucket? And just like that, I was dismissed. Again. I pushed the food around my plate, feeling the same familiar sting rise in my chest, wondering why I continued to let these dinners affect me after so many years. Across the table, Aunt Margaret caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing smile. She could see I was holding something back. What none of them realized was that the real conversation of the evening hadn't even started yet. As the plates from the main course were cleared, my father placed his glass down and cleared his throat. That simple gesture was the family's unspoken signal that something important was coming. The room fell quiet immediately. Even Charlotte paused her wedding talk, sensing the shift. Your mother and I, my father began, swirling the last of his scotch, have been doing some serious estate planning. His tone was rehearsed, clinical, like he was announcing quarterly earnings instead of family decisions. With Nicholas's advancement and Charlotte's upcoming marriage, it felt like the right time to revisit the family's financial structure. My mother nodded beside him, her expression solemn as though they were delivering some noble, difficult decision. You all know that the Dawson name comes with certain expectations, my father continued. We have always emphasized choices that honor our legacy and strengthen our standing for future generations. I felt my stomach knot, recognizing where this was heading. Any conversation involving family legacy usually ended with some thinly veiled criticism of my life. Nicholas will be assuming trustee responsibilities for the main family investment portfolio beginning next year, he said, smiling with pride at my brother. He's proven himself to be a capable steward of the Dawson name. Nicholas gave a modest nod, barely concealing his satisfaction. Charlotte and her fiancé will receive the Cape Cod property after their wedding, my father added. We feel it will provide a solid foundation as they begin their married life and his political career. It's the logical choice, Charlotte chimed in, her voice sweet but cutting. Brian's work will benefit tremendously from having a family home with historical significance. Then my father turned toward me. His eyes shifted from warmth to something colder, more analytical. The mood around the table seemed to sharpen. And as for you, Emily, he paused. I sat up straighter, feeling Aunt Margaret's hand gently squeeze mine under the table. After much consideration, your mother and I have made a decision. Given your unconventional path, we've decided it's time to cut off your financial support entirely. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I didn't need their money. I hadn't accepted a penny from them since college. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the public, calculated way they chose to announce it, like they were disciplining an unruly child who still hadn't grown up. My mother jumped in, delivering her part of the rehearsed speech with icy poise. Effective immediately, your allowance, any future inheritance considerations, access to the family vacation homes, everything will be suspended until you realign your choices more appropriately with what it means to be a Dawson. Appropriately, I repeated slowly, my voice even, though I could feel my pulse quickening. You mean until I abandon my career and do something you actually approve of? Don't be dramatic, Emily, Charlotte interjected, wearing that sickly sweet smile. They just want what's best for you. You've been chasing this tech project for years and it's going nowhere. Nicholas nodded, piling on. The family has a reputation to maintain, Emily. Your choices reflect on all of us. I looked around the table, scanning each face. My father's stern disappointment, my mother's cold concern, Nicholas's patronizing smirk, Charlotte's thinly veiled satisfaction. Only Aunt Margaret looked truly pained. What exactly do you expect me to do? I asked, my voice steady but tight. Quit my company? Go back to business school? Marry someone from your pre-approved list? My mother sighed as though I was being unreasonable. We're trying to help you course correct before it's too late. You're almost 30, Emily. You've accomplished very little. You've had plenty of time. The irony of her words nearly made me laugh. The company I had built from nothing was quietly on track to outpace anything my siblings had achieved, but they still saw me as a directionless disappointment. You've had years to build something respectable, my father added, his tone firm. And yet you insist on wasting your time with this healthcare software side project? It's not a side project, I said, my voice low but firm. It's a company. My company, Charlotte, actually laughed. Please, Emily. You work for a startup that will probably be out of business in a year like most of them. You've always been creative, my mother said dismissively, as if I was dabbling in a hobby. But real businesses require business sense, something you chose not to pursue when you rejected proper business education. My father leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like he was offering me fatherly advice. This isn't punishment, Emily. This is motivation. Sometimes people need consequences before they make better decisions. The condescension was suffocating. Years of silent tolerance bubbled beneath my skin. I had waited for the right moment to finally reveal everything. I hadn't expected it to arrive like this, served alongside roast duck in the family dining room. So let me get this straight, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. You're cutting me off because you don't find my work impressive enough. We're reallocating family resources toward ventures that demonstrate stability and proper ambition, my father replied, his investment banker instincts fully engaged. Nicholas and Charlotte have shown sound judgment. You, unfortunately, have not. Before I could respond further, my phone vibrated inside my purse. I ignored it, focusing on the conversation, but a second buzz followed, then a third. Multiple calls, one after the other. It was Olivia. Alicia had a system for emergencies. Multiple calls in a row meant something urgent. That's not true, my mother said weakly, trying to appear wounded by my accusation. We've always supported your independence. Supported? I repeated, my voice sharper now. You've dismissed every choice I've ever made. You didn't even come to my MIT graduation. MIT isn't Harvard? Charlotte muttered, as if that explained everything. My phone buzzed again, a fourth time. You might want to take that, Aunt Margaret whispered softly. It sounds important. I paused, my father sighing loudly at what he saw as another breach of etiquette. Excuse me, I said, standing up and pulling my phone from my purse. I need to take this. My father rolled his eyes. I'm sure your little startup can survive one family dinner. I stepped a few feet away but remained in the dining room, my heart pounding. Olivia, what's going on? Her voice came through loud and clear, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Emily, I've been trying to reach you. SoftBank just confirmed the $40 million investment. The valuation is official. We've hit $100 million pre-IPO. Goldman's team is celebrating. The entire table froze. Silence hung so thick in the room I could feel it pressing against my skin. For a few long seconds, no one at the table spoke. The air seemed frozen, thick with shock. My mother's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. My father's carefully controlled expression broke into something between confusion and calculation. Charlotte's mouth literally fell open, and Nicholas looked like he had been sucker punched. That's incredible news, I managed, keeping my voice even, though inside my heart was hammering. Can you walk me through the details, Olivia? Oblivious to the audience listening in on the other side of the call, Olivia continued, her voice bright and filled with excitement. Of course, the SoftBank investment puts us officially at a $100 million pre-IPO valuation. Goldman's team is locking in the final paperwork as we speak. The Wall Street Journal has already scheduled the exclusive interview for Monday. They're adding you to their Billionaires in the Making feature. Oh, and the Hospital Association just confirmed they want you as the keynote speaker at their annual conference. The CEO himself called personally. Thank you, Olivia, I said, glancing at my stunned family as I spoke. That's wonderful news. Let's schedule a full team meeting tomorrow morning to review next steps. I ended the call and slowly returned to my seat at the table. The silence that greeted me was almost sweet. Aunt Margaret was the first to break it with a soft chuckle. She raised her wine glass and smiled. Well, she said, her voice full of warmth and pride, I believe congratulations are in order. The rest of my family remained frozen, like they couldn't quite process what they had just heard. My mother recovered first, her social instincts kicking in as if nothing had happened. Emily, darling, she said, her voice suddenly sweet, the honeyed tone she usually reserved for Nicholas and Charlotte. Why didn't you tell us? What wonderful news. We are just so proud of you. I could see the wheels turning behind her smile. Less than 10 minutes earlier, they had essentially disowned me. Now, I was suddenly an asset again. My father leaned forward slightly, his expression calculating. 100 million, he repeated slowly. That's the valuation for your healthcare company? Vital Inc., I supplied calmly. Yes, we're preparing for our IPO now. Goldman Sachs is handling the offering. I couldn't help but add, your firm, Dad. Nicholas blinked as if trying to reset his entire understanding of me. You're working with Goldman? He asked, his voice tighter than usual. Which team? Marcus Steinberg's group, I said, naming one of Goldman's most prestigious partners, and one of my father's longtime professional acquaintances. Marcus has been personally overseeing the deal. My father's eyebrows lifted slightly, and for the first time in my adult life, I heard something close to genuine respect in his voice. Marcus hasn't led a healthcare IPO in years. He made an exception, I said evenly. He believes in what we're building. Charlotte, always quick to pivot, jumped in with forced enthusiasm. This is amazing, Emily. I always knew you were brilliant with all your computer stuff. I smiled politely, refusing to let her rewrite the narrative she had helped build for years. Did you? I asked gently, because that's not how I remember it. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, this time a text from Olivia. Wall Street Journal wants exclusive comment on SoftBank deal. Deadline in 3 hours. Photo shoot confirmed for Tuesday. I glanced up from the message to see my mother's eyes scanning me carefully, as if suddenly noticing me for the first time. Is that a Cartier watch? She asked, pointing to my wrist. I nodded. Yes, last year's model. Her gaze shifted to my simple black dress. And your dress. That's not Banana Republic, is it? Celine, I replied calmly. I dress down for family dinners. The implication hung in the air. I had been deliberately hiding the extent of my success from them for years. My father cleared his throat, his businessman mask slipping fully into place now. Emily, clearly there's been a misunderstanding about your professional situation. Perhaps we should revisit our earlier discussion. About cutting me off? I asked bluntly. He winced slightly. About the financial arrangements. Obviously, circumstances have changed. Have they? I asked, my voice steady. Because nothing about my company changed in the last 15 minutes. I'm still the same person doing the same work you dismissed just moments ago. Don't be difficult, dear. My mother interjected, trying to soften the conversation. Your father is simply trying to correct a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I replied. You made your position perfectly clear. My choices didn't align with Dawson family values. Nicholas jumped in, attempting damage control. We were just concerned, Emily. You never mentioned any of your success. I heard Aunt Margaret mutter under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I wonder why. Charlotte, always the one to cut through to the bottom line, asked flatly, How much are you worth right now? I looked at her, my tone calm but direct. Vitalink is valued at $100 million pre-IPO. I own 51%. The quick mental math made the air shift once again. That's over $50 million, my father said slowly. On paper, for now, I confirmed. The IPO is expected to increase that significantly, and we're already preparing for international expansion next quarter. My mother reached across the table to grasp my hand. Something so foreign it startled me. Sweetheart, this is wonderful. We should celebrate. We'll plan something at the club. A proper event. That won't be necessary, I said gently, pulling my hand back. Nonsense, she insisted. This is a huge accomplishment for the family. For the family, I repeated softly. Just a moment ago, I wasn't Dawson enough to be included in family resources. Now suddenly my company's success belongs to the family? My father shifted in his seat. Perhaps we were hasty earlier. These decisions should be made with complete information. No, I said quietly. You had all the information you valued. You knew I worked in healthcare technology. You knew I started a company. You simply didn't care because it didn't fit your version of success. Nicholas tried one last angle, his voice slightly desperate now. Well, startup valuations can be unstable. We were just concerned about long-term stability. Was it concern? I asked. Or was it judgment? Charlotte, never one to let an opportunity slip, jumped in again. Emily, with your tech expertise and Brian's political connections, we could do amazing things together. He's actually been looking for innovative healthcare platforms to support in his campaign. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, they were already trying to turn my success into a political stepping stone. And Dad? She continued, her eyes bright. Imagine the investment opportunities for the family fund. Getting in before the IPO would be incredibly advantageous. My father nodded quickly, seizing the idea. We should discuss how to structure the family's investment. I can call Marcus tomorrow. Stop, I said quietly but firmly. The entire table froze. He winced slightly. About the financial arrangements. Obviously, circumstances have changed. Have they? I asked, my voice steady. Because nothing about my company changed in the last 15 minutes. I'm still the same person doing the same work you dismissed just moments ago. Don't be difficult, dear. My mother interjected, trying to soften the conversation. Your father is simply trying to correct a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I replied. You made your position perfectly clear. My choices didn't align with Dawson family values. Nicholas jumped in, attempting damage control. We were just concerned, Emily. You never mentioned any of your success. I heard Aunt Margaret mutter under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I wonder why. Charlotte, always the one to cut through to the bottom line, asked flatly, How much are you worth right now? I looked at her, my tone calm but direct. Vitalink is valued at $100 million pre-IPO. I own 51%. The quick mental math made the air shift once again. That's over $50 million, my father said slowly. On paper, for now, I confirmed. The IPO is expected to increase that significantly, and we're already preparing for international expansion next quarter. My mother reached across the table to grasp my hand, something so foreign it startled me. Sweetheart, this is wonderful. We should celebrate. We'll plan something at the club, a proper event. That won't be necessary, I said gently, pulling my hand back. Nonsense, she insisted. This is a huge accomplishment for the family. For the family, I repeated softly. Just a moment ago, I wasn't Dawson enough to be included in family resources. Now suddenly my company's success belongs to the family? My father shifted in his seat. Perhaps we were hasty earlier. These decisions should be made with complete information. No, I said quietly. You had all the information you valued. You knew I worked in healthcare technology. You knew I started a company. You simply didn't care because it didn't fit your version of success. Nicholas tried one last angle, his voice slightly desperate now. Well, startup valuations can be unstable. We were just concerned about long-term stability. Was it concern? I asked. Or was it judgment? Charlotte, never one to let an opportunity slip, jumped in again. Emily, with your tech expertise and Brian's political connections, we could do amazing things together. He's actually been looking for innovative healthcare platforms to support in his campaign. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, they were already trying to turn my success into a political stepping stone. And Dad? She continued, her eyes bright. Imagine the investment opportunities for the family fund. Getting in before the IPO would be incredibly advantageous. My father nodded quickly, seizing the idea. We should discuss how to structure the family's investment. I can call Marcus tomorrow. Stop, I said quietly but firmly. The entire table froze. The drive back to Aunt Margaret's Cambridge apartment was quiet at first. The weight of everything that had just happened hung heavy between us, but not in a way that felt uncomfortable. It was more like quiet relief, the kind that comes after years of holding your breath and finally exhaling. After a few minutes, Aunt Margaret broke the silence with a soft chuckle. $50,000 for a speaking fee, she said, shaking her head with a grin. Your mother almost swallowed her pearl necklace. I laughed, the tension finally starting to loosen in my chest. I don't actually charge that much, but for Charlotte's fiancé, I'd make an exception. Aunt Margaret smiled, her eyes twinkling in the glow of the streetlights. Good. He's always been a little too self-impressed for my taste. When we pulled up to her brownstone, neither of us moved to get out of the car right away. You knew, didn't you? I finally asked. About Vitalink. Margaret's smile deepened. I read the tech section of the Times, Emily. You were featured 3 months ago. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I looked down, feeling both grateful and guilty. I should have told you sooner. I got used to keeping it separate from the family. For good reason, she said gently, patting my hand. You grew up in a world where success meant following one very narrow path. You found your own way. That takes courage most people never develop. I nodded slowly. Sometimes I still feel like I'm chasing their approval, even though I know I don't need it anymore. That's not weakness, she said softly. That's being human. But tonight you didn't just stand up to them. You stood up for yourself. And that's something they'll never fully understand. I drove home alone that night, feeling lighter than I had in years. My South Boston loft welcomed me back with its high ceilings, exposed brick, and views of the harbor. This place wasn't just an apartment. It was proof of what I had built entirely on my own. As I kicked off my shoes and poured a glass of wine, my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. A text from my father. We should meet to discuss family investment strategy. Lunch tomorrow at the club? An email from my mother. Darling, I've added you to the guest list for the Symphony Gala. The chairman would love to discuss a potential donation from your company. A message from Nicholas. Very impressive move, sis. Let's get coffee. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the healthcare tech sector. And from Charlotte. Brian would love your insights for his healthcare platform. Also, any chance Vitalink would consider making a donation to his campaign? P.S. I'd like to introduce you to my friend Thomas. Harvard Medical. Family money. Very eligible. I stared at my phone, the absurdity almost making me laugh. Just 24 hours earlier, they had deemed my work unworthy of their name. Now, suddenly, I was a valuable resource again. I set the phone aside without responding. Instead, I called Olivia. I'm so sorry, she said the second she answered. I didn't realize you were at a family dinner. I should have waited. Don't apologize, I said, smiling. Your timing was perfect. Really? Honestly, I don't think it could have happened at a better moment. Olivia laughed softly, her voice filled with relief. How did they take the news? Exactly how I expected, I said. Suddenly, my little computer hobby has become absolutely fascinating to them. There was a pause on the other end. Then Olivia asked, What are you going to do? I leaned back against the couch, my voice steady. Focus on what matters. We have an IPO to prepare for. Hospital systems to serve, and actual lives to improve. The family politics can wait. Good answer, Olivia said, her tone turning businesslike again. The team wants to celebrate the SoftBank deal. Breakfast meeting at 8? Perfect, I said, smiling. Oh, and make sure you order the good champagne. They've earned it. The next morning, I walked into Vitalink's Kendall Square office to find the entire team already gathered in the conference room, faces glowing with excitement. Developers, designers, healthcare specialists, administrative staff, every single person in that room had poured themselves into this vision long before anyone outside these walls believed in it. As I set my bag down, Olivia handed me a glass of champagne. Before we popped the corks, I paused, scanning the room, letting the moment fully settle over me. I want to thank each of you. What we've built isn't just valuable because of market valuations or investor headlines. It's valuable because it matters. Because every day, patients who once waited months for care are now being seen in days. Because what we've done together is actually changing lives. Olivia raised her glass with a smile. To Vitalink, and to Emily, who saw what healthcare could become while everyone else was stuck in what it was. The room erupted in applause as champagne glasses clinked around the table. After the celebration, I returned to my office to find an enormous floral arrangement waiting for me. Towering, over the top, and painfully familiar in its extravagance. The card read, So proud of our brilliant daughter. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at the card for a moment, the absurdity almost laughable. Just 24 hours earlier, they had officially disowned me. Now I was their brilliant daughter again, conveniently timed with a headline valuation. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Olivia peeked in. Your father has called 3 times, and Nicholas is downstairs. I raised an eyebrow. Nicholas is here? He says he was in the neighborhood. She added air quotes with her fingers. I sighed lightly. Give me 5 minutes, then send him up. When Nicholas entered, his expression was carefully balanced between awkward and calculating. His eyes scanned the office, The floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the framed Wall Street Journal article already mounted on the wall. "Nice setup," he said, letting out a low whistle. "Very tech startup chic." I didn't offer him a seat. "What brings you to Kendall Square, Nicholas? Dad's office is downtown." "Can a brother visit his little sister?" he replied with a forced smile. "You've never done so before," I reminded him. He had the decency to look momentarily embarrassed. "Look, Emily, about last night." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "Let me stop you right there. If you're here to pitch family investment proposals or suggest partnership opportunities, I'm not interested." He frowned, leaning in slightly. "That's a bit harsh. We're family." "Yes, we are," I agreed. "Which is why I'm open to having lunch with you sometime, making small talk at holidays, even sharing neutral conversations. But VitalLink is off limits for family involvement." His face stiffened. "That's not very business savvy. The Dawson Network could offer—" I interrupted again, my voice calm but direct. "The Dawson Network was never offered to me when I was building this, and I don't need it now." Nicholas shifted in his chair, searching for a new angle. "Dad feels terrible about how the dinner went. Cutting you off, it wasn't meant to punish you. It was meant to motivate you. We had no idea you were already this successful." "And if I hadn't been?" I asked, my voice tightening. "If I was exactly who you thought I was? Just some mid-level employee at a small struggling startup? Would cutting me off still have been acceptable?" He opened his mouth but had no answer. I glanced at the clock on the wall. "I have a meeting with actual investors who supported this company before it had a dollar to its name. So unless there's something else—" He stood up, slipping back into his business mask. "Right, I'll tell Dad you're busy. Maybe dinner next week? He wants to make things right." "Tell him I'll call when I'm ready," I said firmly. Then I added, "And Nicholas, if you're ever genuinely interested in understanding what I do, not just what I'm worth, I'd be happy to explain it, but only if you really want to know." He gave me a brief, tight smile and left. I turned to Olivia. "Have the flowers delivered to the children's ward at Mass General," I said. She nodded, already understanding. Then I returned my attention to where it belonged: the IPO paperwork, the expansion plans, and the work that actually mattered. In the weeks following that dinner, I kept my distance from the family's sudden attempts to pull me back into their orbit. My mother's calls went to voicemail. My father's lunch invitations were politely declined. Nicholas's texts about collaboration opportunities were left unanswered. Charlotte's thinly disguised requests for campaign donations disappeared into the silence. The only family relationship I nurtured was with Aunt Margaret. She visited the office one afternoon, finally seeing everything I had built up close. "This is extraordinary," she said softly as we walked through the open workspace. Developers huddled around whiteboards, healthcare specialists reviewed data sets, and engineers fine-tuned the algorithms that matched patients to doctors within hours rather than weeks. "You've created something that actually helps people." "That was always the goal," I told her. "The valuation is nice. The headlines are nice. But this," I gestured toward the team, "this is what matters." Margaret smiled with quiet pride. "That's exactly why you've succeeded. You weren't chasing money or approval. You solved a real problem." As we moved through the space, employees waved and greeted me. It wasn't the hollow respect I had seen in my father's corporate world, where titles demanded deference. Here, it was genuine. A mutual respect born out of shared purpose, not hierarchy. "You've built a family here, Emily," Margaret said softly. "A chosen one." I nodded, looking around at the vibrant, buzzing office. "I didn't realize it at first," I admitted. "But you're right. For years, I had chased something from my biological family that they were never capable of giving me: understanding, respect, belief. But while I had been chasing that, I had unknowingly built something far more meaningful. A team that believed in the work. A mission that was bigger than any one person. A family that wasn't tied by blood, but by shared values." 6 months later, Vitalink's IPO exceeded even the most optimistic projections. On the first day of trading, we closed at a valuation of $220 million. My personal net worth had officially surpassed $100 million, more than the combined assets of my entire extended family. The media attention was overwhelming. Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, CNBC, all wanting to tell the story of the unexpected healthcare disruptor. I gave the interviews, but I kept the focus on the work. Not my family, not the drama behind closed doors. My first major decision post-IPO was to establish the Dawson Innovation Foundation, a $20 million fund dedicated to supporting young women in technology, particularly in healthcare solutions. The name was deliberate. I was reclaiming the Dawson name, but on my own terms. The foundation's first program offered scholarships to high school girls from underserved communities, providing mentorship, coding camps, and opportunities I never had growing up. When reporters asked if the foundation was named after my family, I always gave the same answer. It's named after me. Nearly a year after that dinner, my parents invited me to another family gathering. This time, it was to celebrate Charlotte's husband's congressional victory. His campaign had been well-funded, well-connected, and well-orchestrated, exactly the kind of political climb my mother had always dreamed for one of her children. I debated whether or not to attend, but in the end, I decided to go. Not out of obligation, but because I finally could walk into that house without carrying any of the weight I once did. When I arrived at the estate, everything was just as meticulously staged as always. The valet took my car keys, not realizing I was no longer arriving in the old Honda Civic, but in my fully owned Tesla Model S. The house was glowing, full of donors, socialites, and press. Inside, I was greeted with wide smiles and carefully rehearsed lines. "There she is," my mother beamed, pulling me into a polished air kiss. "Our brilliant daughter. You've become quite the celebrity." "I'm not here for interviews, Mother," I said gently. "Just family." My father approached, offering a glass of champagne. "You've made us very proud, Emily." I smiled politely but said nothing. I knew they weren't proud of the path I took. They were proud of the headlines, the bank statements, the proximity to my success. That was all. Nicholas quickly appeared, introducing me to his newest venture partners. Charlotte tried to pull me into conversations about healthcare policy, clearly hoping to leverage my expertise for her husband's platform. I offered short, polite answers, but kept my distance. I had no interest in being absorbed into their games again. Later that evening, I found Aunt Margaret standing alone on the back patio, watching the guests swirl through the ballroom. "You didn't stay inside long," I said as I joined her. "Never do," she replied, her voice warm but amused. "That room always smells like ambition and desperation." We both laughed softly. "How do you feel?" she asked, watching me closely. "Different," I admitted. "Lighter. I'm finally not chasing them anymore." She nodded. "Because you don't need to." We stood in silence for a while, the cool breeze carrying faint sounds of clinking glasses and forced laughter from inside. "I used to think I had to earn their love by becoming someone they approved of," I said quietly. "But love that comes with conditions isn't love at all." Margaret smiled, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You've built something far better. A life that doesn't need their approval to be valid. And a family who truly sees you." As we stood there, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Olivia. "Vitalink expansion deal finalized. We're officially entering Europe next quarter." I smiled, typing back a simple reply. "Excellent. Let's celebrate Monday." Margaret glanced over my shoulder and smiled. "Your real family." "My real family," I echoed softly. Inside, the celebration raged on, but out here, under the stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Looking back now, I realized that being cut off wasn't the punishment they thought it would be. It was a gift. Without their safety nets, their constant interference, or their conditional support, I was free to build something on my own terms. I wasn't weighed down by the need to fit into a legacy that never saw me for who I was. Sometimes, the greatest validation doesn't come from the people you spent years trying to impress. It comes from the life you build when you finally stop chasing their approval. I stopped waiting for them to see my worth, and instead, I saw it for myself. And in doing so, I didn't just create a company. I created a purpose. I created impact. I built a team, a family, who believe not in my last name, but in the work we do together. So, if you've ever been dismissed, belittled, or made to feel small because you chose a different path, I hope my story reminds you of this. You don't need anyone's permission to succeed. You don't need anyone's approval to be enough. Sometimes, being the black sheep is exactly what allows you to build the life you were always meant to live. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps more people find these kinds of stories. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of stories just like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.